The nursery lamp cast a soft golden halo across the cream-colored walls, turning the room into a gentle cocoon of warmth and safety. I rocked Lily slowly in the old wooden chair that had once belonged to my grandmother, its gentle creak the only sound besides her tiny, contented sighs. At 6 months old, she was the perfect weight in my arms, warm, fragrant with baby powder, milk, and that unmistakable new life smell that still made my chest ache with pride every single time. Her small fingers clutched the fabric of my shirt, tiny nails pressing little half-moons into the cotton. Outside the cracked window, the late spring evening carried the metallic tang of coming rain mixed with the distant hum of downtown traffic and the faint scent of blooming lilacs from our neighbor's yard. The house felt alive in that quiet way families do when everything is supposed to be right. Downstairs, Amanda's laughter floated up the staircase. Light, melodic, the same sound that had wrapped around my heart since our college days. But tonight, there was something off about it, a fraction too bright. A note held just a second longer than natural. I told myself it was nothing. New motherhood was exhausting. Social life kept her sane. I was the lucky one, the 32-year-old architect who came home every evening to this. My wife, my daughter, the life I had sketched on napkins in lecture halls years ago and somehow managed to build. I never thought the woman I loved could destroy everything with one casual lie about a party. What would you do if the life you built turned out to be built on sand? Hey everyone, my name's Michael. I'm 32, an architect at a small but respected firm downtown. And until a few months ago, I genuinely believed I was living the American dream. Amanda and I met in college. She was the charismatic art history major who could talk to anyone and make them feel like the most interesting person in the room. We dated for 3 years, married for 7, and welcomed Lily 6 months ago in a hospital room filled with too many flowers and not enough sleep. I was the proud, fulfilled family man, the guy who still brought coffee to bed on weekends, who sketched new floor plans at the kitchen island while Amanda cooked, who fell asleep every night thinking nothing in the world could touch what we had built. Amanda was everything I wasn't, socially skilled, effortlessly charming, the planner of every family gathering and girls' night. She didn't have a traditional 9 to 5. She helped organize events for local nonprofits and spent a lot of time networking, as she called it. I love that about her. I never questioned the extra hours, the new perfume that smelled like jasmine and something sharper, or the way she'd laugh off my teasing. Why would I? Our life felt solid. Morning sunlight pouring through the kitchen windows while Lily cooed in her bouncer. Evening walks around the block with the stroller, quiet conversations about the future after Lily went to sleep. That particular evening, I had put Lily down after her bath. The house smelled of lavender baby wash and the faint garlic from the pasta Amanda had made earlier. I walked into our bedroom and saw her at the laptop on the desk by the window. The screen cast a cool blue light across her face, highlighting the delicate line of her cheekbone and the way her dark hair fell over one shoulder. She glanced up the moment I stepped through the doorway. The smile she gave me was quick, too quick, and her fingers moved almost imperceptibly, closing the lid with a soft click before I could see anything. But not before I caught the notification glowing in the corner of the screen. From Nick, I miss you too. Her shoulders tensed under the thin gray sweater she wore, just a microsecond tightening, like a string pulled taut and then released. She turned, stood, and crossed the room to kiss my cheek. Her lips were warm, familiar. Just work stuff, babe, she said lightly, the scent of her shampoo, coconut and something floral, filling the space between us. Ready for bed? I'm exhausted. The air in the room suddenly felt thicker, heavier. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees, even though the heater was running. I wanted to ask who Nick was. I wanted to open the laptop and see the rest of that email. Instead, I smiled, nodded, and said, "Yeah, long day at the site." We climbed into bed. She curled against me the way she always did, one leg draped over mine, her breathing slowing into the steady rhythm I had memorized years ago. I lay there in the dark, the faint glow of the streetlight leaking through the curtains, and stared at the ceiling. The words kept replaying, "I miss you too." A client? A colleague? A friend's husband? The possibilities spun in my head like blueprints I couldn't quite align. I told myself it was nothing. Amanda had always been friendly with everyone. Nick could be anyone. But as the clock ticked past midnight and the house settled into its nighttime creaks and sighs, That single line of text lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest. I listened to my wife breathing beside me and wondered, for the first time in our marriage, whether the woman I thought I knew was still the same person lying next to me. The next morning, everything looked normal again. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows. Lily babbled happily in her high chair while Amanda fed her pureed banana, laughing at the messy face she made. I kissed them both goodbye before heading to the office, the taste of coffee and Amanda's lip balm still on my lips. At work, I lost myself in CAD drawings and client meetings, pushing the email to the back of my mind. But when I came home that evening, Amanda was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low and intimate. She ended the call the instant she saw me, slipping the phone into her back pocket with a casualness that felt just slightly rehearsed. Diane called, she said, her mother, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. She smiled the same bright smile that had once made me feel like the luckiest man alive. She wants to come visit next weekend. You okay with that? I nodded. Of course I was. Diane had always been good with Lily. Everything was fine. Yet as I watched Amanda turn back to the sink, the late sunlight catching the silver necklace I'd given her for our anniversary, I felt the first tiny crack appear in the foundation of the life I loved so much. Something was shifting, and I didn't know why. I only knew that for the first time, the house we had built together no longer felt completely safe. In these opening moments, Michael's complete trust functions as both strength and blind spot. His mind immediately supplies innocent explanations for Amanda's micromovements, the quick smile, the shoulder tension, the laptop snap, because his attachment pattern is one of idealized security. He has built his identity around being the stable provider and loving father. Any crack in that narrative threatens his entire sense of self. Amanda's behavior, by contrast, reveals early manipulative skill. She offers just enough affection to disarm suspicion while concealing the device that holds the truth. The psychological tension here is classic cognitive dissonance. Michael feels the unease in his body, cooler air, heavier silence. But his rational mind refuses to name it. This denial is not weakness. It is the protective mechanism of a man who still believes love is a safe harbor. The email subject line plants the first seed of doubt without immediate proof, forcing the audience to sit inside Michael's fracturing reality. We already sense the inevitable collision between his expectations and the truth that is quietly waiting in her inbox. The following weeks settled into a rhythm that looked almost identical to the life we had always lived, yet every ordinary moment now carried a faint electric static of unease. Amanda's schedule began to shift in small but noticeable ways. Girls' nights that used to happen once a month suddenly became twice a week. She would kiss Lily goodnight, tell me she was meeting Sarah and Jess at the new wine bar downtown, and leave the house smelling of the jasmine perfume that seemed stronger lately. She came home later each time, sometimes after midnight, her cheeks flushed, eyes bright in a way that looked both happy and guarded. When I asked how it was, she would laugh softly, kiss my forehead, and say, "You'd be bored, honey, mostly shop talk and bad dancing. You know how those nights go." I smiled back, but later I noticed her phone always face down on the nightstand. Screen brightness turned so low that when a message arrived at 3 a.m., I could barely see the glow from across the room. She started changing clothes in the bathroom instead of the bedroom, the lock clicking with a soft finality that had never existed before. Some weeks her blouses smelled of a different laundry detergent, something floral and expensive I didn't recognize. The silver necklace I had given her for our anniversary disappeared from her jewelry box. When I asked about it, she said the clasp had broken and she'd taken it to be fixed. Lily, even at 6 months, seemed to sense the change. She fussed more when Amanda held her, tiny fist grabbing at the air as if searching for the calm warmth that used to radiate from her mother. I told myself new mothers were tired, that social life was healthy for her, that I was overthinking everything. But at night, when the house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of floorboards, my mind kept replaying that email subject line. I miss you too. Who misses a colleague like that? One Thursday, I came home early from a site meeting because the client had canceled. The house smelled of fresh coffee and the faint sweetness of Lily's rice cereal. Amanda was in the kitchen on the phone, her voice low and intimate, the kind of tone she used to use with me when we were first dating. She ended the call the moment she heard the front door, slipping the phone into her pocket with a casualness that felt rehearsed. Diane called again, she said, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. She's excited about visiting next weekend. Wants to take Lily to the park. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and tried to ignore the way my stomach tightened. That same evening, my old college buddy Greg stopped by with blueprints for a new project we were consulting on. While Amanda was upstairs bathing Lily, Greg leaned against the kitchen counter and hesitated, beer in hand. "Everything good with you too, man?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. I shrugged it off with a laugh. "Yeah, why?" He looked toward the stairs, then back at me. "Just, Amanda seems different lately. More distracted. But hey, what do I know?" He changed the subject quickly, but the words stayed with me long after he left. The doubt grew like a slow leak in a roof, small enough to ignore during daylight hours, impossible to ignore at 3 a.m. when I lay awake listening to Amanda's even breathing and wondering why her phone now required a new passcode she hadn't shared with me. I loved her. I trusted her completely. Yet every small secrecy chipped away at the foundation until the house we had built together started to feel like it was resting on shifting sand. I began watching her more closely without meaning to. How she angled her body away when typing on her phone, how her smile sometimes didn't reach her eyes, how she would pause just a fraction too long before answering simple questions about her day. One Sunday afternoon, we took Lily to the park. The sun was warm on our skin. The air smelled of cut grass and sunscreen. Amanda pushed the stroller while I walked beside her, holding her hand the way we always had. For a moment, everything felt perfect again. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it, smiled, a private, soft smile I hadn't seen in months, and slipped the phone back without showing me. When I asked who it was, she said, "Just a notification from the nonprofit group." But her fingers tightened slightly around mine, and the rest of the walk home felt heavier somehow. That night, after Lily was asleep, Amanda fell asleep quickly on her side of the bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the faint blue light from her charging phone pulsing like a heartbeat on the nightstand. The question I had been avoiding finally formed clearly in my mind. What if the cracks I was seeing weren't in my imagination? What if something was actually wrong? I didn't have answers. But for the first time, I realized I was afraid to find them. She started changing clothes in the bathroom instead of the bedroom, the lock clicking with a soft finality that had never existed before. Some weeks her blouses smelled of a different laundry detergent, something floral and expensive I didn't recognize. The silver necklace I had given her for our anniversary disappeared from her jewelry box. When I asked about it, she said the clasp had broken and she'd taken it to be fixed. Lily, even at 6 months, seemed to sense the change. She fussed more when Amanda held her, tiny fists grabbing at the air as if searching for the calm warmth that used to radiate from her mother. I told myself new mothers were tired, that social life was healthy for her, that I was overthinking everything. But at night, when the house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of floorboards, my mind kept replaying that email subject line. "I miss you too." Who misses a colleague like that? One Thursday, I came home early from a site meeting because the client had canceled. The house smelled of fresh coffee and the faint sweetness of Lily's rice cereal. Amanda was in the kitchen on the phone, her voice low and intimate, the kind of tone she used to use with me when we were first dating. She ended the call the moment she heard the front door, slipping the phone into her pocket with a casualness that felt rehearsed. "Diane called again," she said, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "She's excited about visiting next weekend. Wants to take Lily to the park." I nodded, kissed her cheek, and tried to ignore the way my stomach tightened. That same evening, my old college buddy Greg stopped by with blueprints for a new project we were consulting on. While Amanda was upstairs bathing Lily, Greg leaned against the kitchen counter and hesitated, beer in hand. "Everything good with you too, man?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. I shrugged it off with a laugh. "Yeah, why?" He looked toward the stairs, then back at me. "Just, Amanda seems different lately. More distracted. But hey, what do I know?" He changed the subject quickly, but the words stayed with me long after he left. The doubt grew like a slow leak in a roof, small enough to ignore during daylight hours, impossible to ignore at 3 a.m. when I lay awake listening to Amanda's even breathing and wondering why her phone now required a new passcode she hadn't shared with me. I loved her. I trusted her completely. Yet every small secrecy chipped away at the foundation until the house we had built together started to feel like it was resting on shifting sand. I began watching her more closely without meaning to. How she angled her body away when typing on her phone, how her smiles sometimes didn't reach her eyes, how she would pause just a fraction too long before answering simple questions about her day. One Sunday afternoon, we took Lily to the park. The sun was warm on our skin. The air smelled of cut grass and sunscreen. Amanda pushed the stroller while I walked beside her, holding her hand the way we always had. For a moment, everything felt perfect again. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it, smiled, a private, soft smile I hadn't seen in months, and slipped the phone back without showing me. When I asked who it was, she said, "Just a notification from the nonprofit group." But her fingers tightened slightly around mine, and the rest of the walk home felt heavier somehow. That night, after Lily was asleep, Amanda fell asleep quickly on her side of the bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the faint blue light from her charging phone pulsing like a heartbeat on the nightstand. The question I had been avoiding finally formed clearly in my mind. What if the cracks I was seeing weren't in my imagination? What if something was actually wrong? I didn't have answers, but for the first time, I realized I was afraid to find them. Michael's primary mistake was weaponizing his own trust against his intuition. Instead of asking direct questions, he rationalized every red flag. Late nights, lowered screen brightness, the evasive Diane called, because confronting Amanda risked shattering the identity he had built as the secure husband and father. Amanda's mistake was underestimating how small lies accumulate. Each one required another, creating the very distance she later claimed was just stress. Greg's hesitant question is the first external mirror held up to Michael's denial, yet he chooses not to pursue it. The lesson emerging here is that silence is not neutrality, it is permission. The story shows how emotional avoidance, while protective in the moment, erodes the very relationship it tries to save. By the end of this section, we understand that the real betrayal began not with the affair itself, but with the first unasked question Michael decided to swallow. I started noticing patterns the way an architect notices hairline cracks in a foundation before anyone else does. Amanda's work events always fell on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Her phone now stayed in her purse even during dinner, and she would angle her body away when typing. One night, I saw a $187 charge on our joint credit card for a boutique hotel downtown. The same night, she had told me she was at a party with friends. When I casually mentioned the charge over breakfast the next morning, she didn't even blink. "Oh, that was for the group," she said smoothly, wiping Lily's face with a cloth. "Someone's card got declined. I covered, and they Venmos me later. Sorry, I should have told you." The explanation was so reasonable, so perfectly delivered, that I felt guilty for even noticing it. Still, the moral weight of checking her laptop felt like its own kind of betrayal. I waited until she was in the shower one Saturday morning, heart hammering against my ribs, the sound of water running like white noise in my ears. I opened the browser history. Nothing incriminating, just shopping sites, recipe blogs, and Lily's pediatrician portal. Relief flooded through me, so strongly my knees felt weak. Closed the laptop and told myself I was being ridiculous. But 2 days later, a handwritten letter arrived in the mail, addressed to Amanda in masculine handwriting. No return address. The envelope smelled faintly of cologne, something woody and expensive. I took it to the garage, locked the door, and steamed it open over the kettle, steam curling in the cold air like smoke. The paper shook in my hands as I read. "Last night was everything. Can't stop thinking about you and our little secret. Can't wait until next Tuesday. Nick." The words burned themselves into my retinas. I resealed the envelope as carefully as I could and placed it back in the mailbox, hands trembling. That weekend, I finally broke down and told Greg everything over beers at a quiet bar near his office. He listened without judgment, then recommended a private investigator he had used for a work-related background check years ago. "Just to put your mind at ease, man," he said. "Better to know." The first report arrived 4 days later. Photos of Amanda at a cafe with a woman I didn't recognize. "Just coffee with an old friend from college," the PI wrote. Relief hit me again, so strong I almost called the whole thing off. But the second envelope came 3 days after that. This time the photos showed Amanda and a man leaving the same downtown hotel, his hand resting on the small of her back in a way that was unmistakably intimate. Bank records showed regular cash withdrawals of several $100s, and a short note from the PI. The affair has been going on at least 2 years. There's more. Medical records flagged something unusual. Strongly suggest a paternity test for Lily. I sat in my car in the driveway for 40 minutes with the engine off, rain streaking the windshield in silver lines. The photos lay on the passenger seat like evidence in a trial I never wanted to attend. The man in the pictures looked familiar. Nick, Rachel's husband, the couple we had double-dated with last Christmas. Every memory of Lily's first smile, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. I stared at the warm light glowing through our living room windows where Amanda was feeding our daughter dinner and realized the investigation had only just begun. The cracks I had been trying to ignore had become a full structural failure, and there was no going back. This section marks the irreversible pivot from suspicion to certainty. The letter is the first point of no return. Until then, Michael could still choose denial. Opening it crossed a moral line he can never uncross. The PI photos and financial records form the second stage. They replace ambiguity with evidence. The paternity suggestion is the third and final stage. The moment the betrayal stops being about the marriage and begins to threaten Michael's identity as Lily's father. Each stage narrows the path forward until only confrontation remains. The red herring cafe photos brilliantly illustrate how hope dies in increments, making the final blow land harder. By the end of part 3, reconciliation is no longer psychologically possible. The relationship has already died. Michael just hasn't said the words yet. I waited until Lily was sound asleep in her crib, the baby monitor glowing softly on the kitchen counter. The house was unnaturally silent except for the low tick of the wall clock and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Amanda sat on the living room couch in the dim lamplight, legs tucked under her, scrolling through her phone with the same casual grace she always had. I placed the thick manila folder on the coffee table between us, photos, bank statements, the handwritten letter, and the sealed envelope from the lab. "Amanda," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. "Who is Nick?" Her face went completely still. The phone slipped from her fingers onto the cushion with a soft thud. For a long moment, the only sound was her shallow breathing and the faint creak of the house settling around us. Then the tears came, real, messy, the kind that shake shoulders and smear mascara. She didn't deny it. She simply whispered, "It started 2 years ago. I never meant for it to go this far." The words hit me like cold water poured slowly down my spine. 2 years. While she was pregnant with Lily. While I was sketching nurseries and planning our future. I slid the paternity results across the table. "Lily isn't mine." She stared at the paper, lips trembling. "I was going to tell you, after she was born. Nick wanted me to leave, but I couldn't. I love you, Michael. This was a mistake, an emotional mistake." I didn't raise my voice. The anger was there, burning white-hot in my chest, but it had already burned down into something colder and clearer. "You lied about the party last month. You lied every time you came home smelling like hotel soap. You looked me in the eye while you carried another man's child and let me believe she was mine." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout could have been. Her hands shook as she reached for me across the table. I stood up before she could touch me. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. The evidence goes to Diane, to our friends, to Rachel. I've already been asked to testify in Nick's divorce case." Her face crumpled, but I felt nothing except the strange calm that comes when the worst has finally happened. The lamp cast long shadows across the room, turning familiar furniture into strangers. The woman I had loved for over a decade suddenly looked like someone I no longer recognized. She tried again, voice cracking. "Please, Michael. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything. Lily needs both of us." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the same charismatic woman who had once made me feel invincible, now reduced to desperate bargaining. The jasmine perfume she wore suddenly smelled cloying and wrong. "There is no we anymore," I said quietly. "There hasn't been for a long time. You made sure of that." The confrontation ended not with screaming or thrown objects, but with a stillness that felt more final. Amanda sat on the couch, crying softly while I walked upstairs to check on Lily. The baby slept peacefully, unaware that her entire world had just shifted. I stood in the doorway watching her small chest rise and fall, And for the first time, I understood that love doesn't require biology. But trust, once broken, can never be rebuilt the same way. Michael's restrained calm is the direct external expression of internal emotional collapse. Shock and grief have already moved through rage in private. By the time of confrontation, only clarity remains. Amanda's tears and minimization, emotional mistake, reveal her core personality trait, charismatic deflection that has worked for years. The action of placing the folder on the table is Michael's first act of agency after months of passive suffering. Every microreaction, the phone slipping, the trembling hands, the way she reaches for him and he steps back, maps the exact moment love dies. This scene proves that betrayal is not the affair itself, but the sustained deception that made the husband question his own reality and his daughter's identity. The weeks that followed felt like moving through someone else's life in slow motion. Amanda moved her things into the guest room the very next day. The house echoed with polite, careful sentences about Lily's feeding schedule, who would take her to the pediatrician, and whether Diane should still come for her planned visit. My mother-in-law called screaming at first, then crying, then went completely silent once the full evidence package arrived in her mailbox. I sent the same folder to every close friend, including Rachel, who answered the door pale and shaking, clutching the envelope like it might burn her hands. Nick's divorce hearing was scheduled for the following month. My testimony was short, factual, and devastating. Amanda checked herself into a 30-day program for emotional regulation and stress-related behaviors. When she returned, she looked smaller somehow, eyes hollow, voice softer. She apologized in long, tearful letters left on the kitchen table, promising co-parenting, individual therapy, couples counseling if I would consider it. I read every word, nodded when she spoke, and kept the same careful distance. The wedding ring came off the day the divorce papers were officially filed. I slept on the couch until I found a small one-bedroom apartment 3 blocks away, close enough for Lily, far enough for my own sanity. Greg helped me move on a rainy Saturday. We carried boxes in silence for the first hour. Then he clapped my shoulder and said, "You're doing the right thing, man." Not many people have the guts to walk away clean. For the first time, I actually believed it. The financial betrayal came out in mediation. Thousands funneled to hotel rooms, gifts, and secret accounts. I didn't fight for revenge. I fought for clarity and fairness. Lily, now 8 months old, still reached for me with the same gummy smile and delighted squeals. Biology or not, she was innocent. The court granted me primary custody during the week. Amanda would have weekends once she proved stability through continued therapy. I stood in my new apartment the first night. Bare white walls, cardboard boxes stacked in corners, the faint chemical smell of fresh paint, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: space to breathe. The quiet wasn't lonely, it was mine. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat on the floor with my back against the wall, and listened to the rain against the windows. For the first time since that email had appeared on Amanda's laptop, I wasn't waiting for the next lie. I was simply existing in a space where truth was the only thing left. Michael entered marriage expecting permanence and biological legacy. Reality delivered deception spanning years and a child who carried another man's DNA. The contrast is brutal yet liberating. The illusion of the perfect wife is replaced by the reality of a manipulative but ultimately broken woman. His expectation of explosive rage gives way to quiet boundary setting. Amanda expected forgiveness through tears and rehab. Reality delivered consequences she could not charm away. The greatest shift is internal. Michael stops measuring his worth by the marriage and begins measuring by his own integrity. This section proves that empowerment does not require drama. It arrives the moment you stop negotiating with someone who has already chosen betrayal. 6 months later, the divorce was final. I kept the small apartment and turned the spare room into a bright, sunny nursery for Lily. Soft yellow walls, new crib, shelves filled with the books I had started reading to her every night. I started running again at sunrise along the river path near my building. The air smelled of wet grass, fresh coffee from the corner cart, and possibility. My projects at the firm began winning small local awards. I poured every ounce of the grief I had carried into clean lines and honest structures that couldn't lie to me. Greg and I grabbed beers on Friday evenings. Rachel and I even met for coffee once. Not romantic. Just two survivors comparing notes and laughing bitterly at how blind we had both been. She thanked me for the truth that had set her free. Amanda and I communicate through a neutral parenting app now. Polite, brief messages focused only on Lily's schedule, doctor appointments, and weekend pickups. She's doing better, working on herself, attending therapy regularly. But the romantic bridge between us is ash, and neither of us pretends otherwise. Some nights Lily stays with me, and I watch her sleep in the new crib, still amazed that love doesn't require DNA. She calls me Dada with the same joy she always has. That single word is enough to rebuild a lifetime on. I realize that trust can break in a single moment of discovery, but resilience is built one honest day at a time. I no longer idealize relationships or people. I observe them with open eyes and healthy boundaries. The American dream I thought I had lost was never the house with the white picket fence or the picture-perfect marriage. It was the man I became when everything familiar was taken away, the man who learned to stand on his own. For the first time in years, my life feels truly mine. The future is wide open, and I'm finally ready to walk into it without looking back over my shoulder. The entire arc traces a classic journey from denial through devastation to quiet empowerment. Michael's initial blind trust, rooted in college romance and new father identity, collided with Amanda's long-term deception, creating a chain reaction that exposed not only infidelity, but financial betrayal and false paternity. Each stage, email, letter, PI, confrontation, legal consequences, served as a point of no return, stripping away illusions until only truth remained. The secondary threads, Diane's shifting allegiance, Greg's quiet knowledge, Rachel's parallel pain, converged at the climax to reinforce that betrayal is never isolated. The deepest lesson is that ignoring small signs is itself a choice with catastrophic consequences. Michael's growth came not from revenge, but from radical acceptance. Loving Lily without biological claim, setting iron boundaries, and rebuilding identity independent of the marriage. Amanda's charisma and manipulation could no longer rewrite reality once evidence was undeniable. The story ends not in bitterness, but in hard-won hope, proof that even the deepest betrayal can become the birthplace of authentic freedom. Nearly 30% of marriages face similar fractures. Yet Michael's story shows the other side. You can lose everything and still become the architect of a better life.